I don't have very much glass, but usually I try to just buy, if it's beer bottles, I just try to take the one.
I take them over to
Bayern takes.
Byron, but some of the wine bottles. I have a couple every week, so it fills up.
Yeah. Is Karen ready? All right, they're ready.
Meeting is called to order. Thank you. Roll call. Will you start over there, Doug, please?
Doug Grimm, Upper Rattlesnake.
Jennifer Copley, University District.
Carol Garlington, Moose Can Gully.
Anthony Joe, Captain John Mullen.
Melissa Niding, River Road.
Randall Gunn, North Side, West Side.
Heidi West, City Council Liaison.
Julie Devlin, Rose Park.
Jeff Stevens, South 39th Street.
Colleen Beal, Lewis and Clark.
Ed Nolder, Riverfront. Mark Foss, South Bay Triangle.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Will someone make a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
I move we adopt the agenda. Doug Grimm.
Seconded?
Second.
Thank you. How about adopting the minutes?
We have to vote. Vote.
Julie, you need to vote on that.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. We're going to vote on approval of the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, anybody? Okay, the minutes are adopted. Thank you.
Julie, actually, that was the adoption of the agenda.
Oh, we had to vote on that as well.
Yes, you had a motion, Doug and Jennifer first and seconded it. Now you have to do approval of the minutes.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Doug Grimm, I move that we approve the minutes.
Is that
Carol
okay?
Garlington, I second.
Okay, we need a second now.
Carol Garlington, I second it.
Thank you, Carol. Now we're going to have a show of hands. Yeah. No, we're not? Voice vote, excuse me, to adopt the minutes. Everyone who approves say yay.
Aye.
Aye. And no? Any noes? No. I like that. Okay, any public comment? We don't have anyone in the audience, so there's no public comment on non-agenda items from the audience. Okay, now our presentation. He should be back in a minute, yeah. His name is Detective Guy Baker, and he's going to give a talk on sex trafficking awareness.
Hey, Julie.
Thank you.
Julie, I want to note for the record that Kate Laney is here for Two Rivers Neighborhood Council.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
How are you guys? So is this an informal group and we just talk and go? Okay. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me to be here for this very important issue. I'm a detective with the Missoula Police Department. It's my 30th year with the police department. I've been a detective for 19 years, and the last 9 years I've spent assigned to the FBI Safe Streets Task Force here in Missoula. So that task force seems to be very unknown by everybody. Everybody knows about the drug task force, but they don't know about the violent crime task force. But that's what I'm a part of. So we work violent crimes, targeting violent offenders and gangs, guns, and drugs under the Safe Streets concept, and that has included sex trafficking. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about that, bring it to your attention. I can't really think of another crime today that has more misperception about it. Everyone seems to think that this doesn't happen here, that it only happens in big cities in other states or in other countries, when I can tell you this has happened on a daily basis in Missoula, Montana, and other cities in Montana. So the victims of these crimes find themselves in a variety of situations. Many have become involved in commercial sex at the direction of manipulation and persuasion of someone who they believe loves them, where others are lured through false promises of employment that are fake when they get there. And then, unfortunately, others, and younger ones usually, are exploited by family members and forced to sell their bodies at the direction of relatives or people that they think they can trust. So I'm going to try to hit as many points as I can. Normally 1 hour is not enough time in this presentation, but I will go as fast as I can. And you guys have handouts, correct? So, yes, Heidi, hi.
Hi. Can you make sure you're talking on the mic so that people at home can hear you too?
On the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. I got you on that. So we got the microphone bent down because we couldn't get the audio to play, so after this video I'll do that. Okay. Any question before we begin? Okay. That's a pretty compelling video that I know touches the hearts of people that watch that, but that is a very accurate window to what these victims face. And I can tell you, against popular demand sometimes, that people have this belief that, oh, they're just prostitutes doing the oldest profession in the world. There is no female who aspires to be a commercial sex worker ever. They get to this situation usually by making bad decisions that they unfortunately are forced to make because they chose that over a worse decision. So let's look at human trafficking worldwide real quick. 27 million victims of human trafficking 5 years ago. About 900,000 foreign nationals are being trafficked worldwide, with about 18 to 20,000 foreign nationals being brought into the United States each year for the purpose of exploitation through sex trafficking and human trafficking. That lower number, that 100,000 children, I've seen that number as high as 200,000, but those are American children, those are our children. Who do you think in our community and communities across the country make up a large percentage of those 100,000? Anyone? Am I supposed to just talk, or is this interactive? What do you think, Mark? So, not Native Americans, runaways. Yep, so runaways, kids who run away, which happens very common, they don't have a plan, and they hit the streets, and within a very short period of time, they realize that they cannot provide their basic necessities of food, clothing, and shelter, and they become very susceptible to exploitation. So, many of the cases I've worked in, going back in the debriefs with these victims, is, that they were homeless and on the street, or they were couch surfing. They were not in what we would consider a good traditional family setting, where when they weren't at the dinner table, somebody was looking for them, or they weren't in bed that night, somebody was looking for them, that they were gone before people realized it. And so when kids hit the streets, they're at particular risk for exploitation with child pornography as well as child sex trafficking. People don't realize how big human trafficking is. Human trafficking is the second leading criminal enterprise on earth today. Number 1 is drugs, number 2 is humans, and number 3 is weapons. So anyone know why human trafficking ranks so high and what makes it unique to drugs and weapons? Yep, very good. So humans are a reusable commodity. So if I have an ounce of meth and I sell it for $800, I got my 8 Benjamins, but I no longer have my product. If I have a female and I can sell her at $200 a trick, I can sell her over and over and over again. And if I'm only selling her 3 times a day, that's 4,000 a week. That's 15,000 with one female, 3 times a day for one pimp or one person exploiting her. And unfortunately, these females and these victims, some of which are male, are with a lot more than 3 customers a day. So quick visits, which are 15 minutes or less, that can range from anywhere from $50 to $100. A girl can make a pimp $1,000 a day doing quick visits, and that's just one girl. So they talk about $33 billion annually in illegal revenue, $9.5 billion in the United States. Today we talk about millions and billions and trillions, but to even put kind of a quantifying perspective on this, if you were to count one number per second, 1, 2, 3, and so on, it'd take you 11 days to count to 1 million, take you 31 years to count to 1 billion, and there hasn't been 1 trillion seconds clicked off the clock since Jesus walked the earth. So $9.5 billion in illicit sales in our country alone. Even how accurate that is, that you can put accurate numbers on national or world trends, but still the United States is a large consumer of commercial sex, and people are exploited through sex trafficking, frequently with commercial sex. So the vast majority involves sexual exploitation, especially when you're dealing with females and minors. So year in and year out in the United States, they estimate about half of all the sex trafficking victims in our country are juveniles. So one of the fastest growing criminal enterprises on earth today, simply because you have low risk, high yield. The police aren't kicking your door in when you're trafficking or pimping girls like they do with drugs, and you can make a lot more money trafficking girls with a lot low risk than trafficking drugs. So, and then several drug conspiracies that our task force has worked with gang members from other states that are trafficking drugs, heroin specifically, and meth into Missoula. They're also trafficking girls. So it's easy to do that, especially when you get the girls addicted to heroin, and they are the source to get them lucid to do what you want and to keep them connected or tethered to you. So we usually think that we solved our problem with slavery, 160 plus years ago, but they say that there's more victims of slavery on earth today than any other time in human history, and obviously human trafficking plays a large role in that. So human trafficking defined federally, compelling or coercing another person's labor or services, and that coercion can be physical or psychological. subtle or overt, and movement is not necessary. So in human trafficking, if that's the top, it's broken into two segments: labor trafficking and sex trafficking. So today we're focusing on sex trafficking. So when someone knowingly recruits, entices, harbors, transports, provides, obtains, or maintains a person or benefits financially of something of value, money or drugs, girls are commonly traded for drugs, and they're participating in this venture. So in the federal system, it's good that on that bottom there, you can see that if the victim is a minor, if they are a juvenile, no separate proof of force, fraud, or coercion is required, and we also don't have to prove that the suspect definitively knew the victim's age, just the fact that they had time to view them. So, you know, when people say, what is sex trafficking, it's simply put that sex trafficking is when a person compels another through force, fraud, or coercion to engage in commercial sex, and that person who's doing the compelling is the one benefiting from it. So we talk about what are the elements of human trafficking. Breaking this down, you can see that there's lots of different variations, but you can take any one aspect in each box, combine it with all three boxes, and you're going to have some element of human trafficking. So if someone is recruited in the first box through fraud, in the second box to engage in commercial sex, they're told that, you know, if you come down here, you're going to be a model. However, when they get there, that's not what's going on. So it's very common that people that exploit these victims, they need to separate them from their family. Once they get them to engage in shameful behavior, they have theoretically cut them off from their family, and then once they're in another city or another state, they are dependent on this person who is going to exploit them. So I've seen that time and time again. There's kind of three basic cases I work. The majority are non-resident suspects who are bringing non-resident girls here through the interstate freeway system on a circuit and posting online ads, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Secondly would be local people who are exploiting and trafficking local girls here. And then thirdly, people from other places that traffic girls from Missoula elsewhere. So I've had two cases in the recent past in which pimps have met girls online through social media and purchased airline tickets for them, and they've left Missoula without their parents' knowledge. So I like to say, not to get on my soapbox, but if you're the parent of a daughter or a son, but especially a daughter, if you have a teenager or a middle school kid, I can't see any benefit of giving them the privacy of the internet in their bedroom at night, because unless you know exactly what they're doing and who they're talking to, you're putting your child and yourself at great risk that they're going to be exploited. So we talk about trafficking and smuggling. Sometimes they're interchangeable. There is a little difference. So talk about that real quick. Trafficking obviously involves crime against a person. A person is involved, as is human smuggling. Smuggling always involves the breach of a border, so it's from one country to another, where human trafficking can be within one country or it can be international. Smuggling is always international from one country to another. So in trafficking, the trafficker is going to maintain control of that person as long as they can, because that person is a commodity to them. Where in smuggling, usually from point A to point B, a price is paid and the relationship ends after they arrive. However, do you think it's common or seldom that smuggling people turns into trafficking once they get to the United States? Very common, because now you have a foreign national that doesn't have a support system. They are socially inept. They don't understand our laws. They're fearful of the police for deportation. And now you have someone that says, you know, I know you paid me $5,000 to get here, but you're now going to have to work in my hotel. You're going to have to turn commercial tricks. You're going to have to work in my massage parlor or my restaurant. And after a period of time, we'll look at how much you've made, and then we'll decide what we do then. I'm going to hold on to your papers. Oh, and by the way, if you don't like that idea, I'll contact INS or ICE and we'll get you deported. So with a foreign national, you can see they're very leery of that and they don't know who to go to. So that scenario plays out far too often in the United States. It is actually a federal law to threaten legal process. So if you threaten a foreign national with that, where if you don't do this, I am going to report you, that is a felony in the federal system. So as we talked about, smuggling often develops into trafficking. So as we talked about, a person commit sex trafficking when they compel another through force, fraud, or coercion to engage in a commercial sex act, and that person benefits from it. So breaking this down real quick, force is real easy to understand. We've all experienced it. It's unpleasant, it hurts, it leaves marks and injury, and people and juries can relate to force. But these other two are very commonly used, and it's hard for people, especially people who are uneducated in this activity, to understand fraud and coercion. So fraud is really just a lie, and it can be a lie in many different ways. So commonly, these victims will meet someone who very quickly tells them they love them, and they believe that this person is their boyfriend, and they love them, and they don't consider them a pimp. But this boyfriend, pimp, who is now exploiting them, is going to, as I said, separate them from their family, their friends, have them engage in shameful behavior, isolate them to travel to another city or another state where they don't know anyone and they're particularly dependent on that person, and then they start to get in their head, play games with them, believing that this is the only person that loves me, and if something happens to me, what's going to happen, or if something happens to him, what's going to happen to me. And so the fraud is usually persuasion, manipulation, and lies. Coercion is not that hard to understand, but it happens all the time. It's basically, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. So if you don't do what I ask, there's going to be an unpleasant consequence. So oftentimes victims are forced to comply through force. Other times, and often, they're forced to comply mentally. So I like to say, modern day slavery is not victims whose hands are bound by chains, their mind is. So their mind is very powerful, yet they feel that they don't have other options, and this person has got into their mind, and they've shrunk their world down to him, and his exploitive nature is not recognized by them as they're experiencing it. So they say 3 out of 4 adult prostitutes in the United States, in a study that was done, got into the game or the life as a juvenile. So that should be pretty telling about American society and how unpleasant or how unfortunately prevalent child sexual assault is. The most common sexual assault of children in the United States is familial sexual assault. And again, I like to tell law enforcement and prosecutors, if you're dealing with a minor victim of sex trafficking, you shouldn't just look at her or him as a prostitute, because kids don't come up with this idea on their own. Somebody has exploited them, and you need to look at the bigger picture as to where this influence is coming from. 1 in 3 minors living on the streets will be approached by someone who tries to exploit them through sex trafficking or child pornography within the first 48 hours. Quick story, we were doing an operation in Colorado a few years ago, Operation Cross Country, and there was a 14 and a 13-year-old who had left a juvenile detention center in Aurora, and we were in this operation checking websites looking for young-looking females, and an ad caught our attention, and this was a story of these 2 girls. They left this detention center in the afternoon, beautiful June day, and by that evening they were begging for food at a McDonald's, and a pimp came upon them and offered to buy them some food because they were hungry, and both these girls wanted Happy Meals, which I thought was pretty compelling as I'm interviewing them, that they didn't want a Big Mac or a Quarter Pounder. That tells you a lot about their mental state when they wanted Happy Meals. They were 13 and 14. And he said, you guys anywhere to go, which they didn't because they're on the streets, they have no plan, they're susceptible. He takes them back to the motel, and by midnight he had had sex with both of them. He had posted ads for them online, and it was the next day around noon that we made contact and actually rescued the 14-year-old. We didn't find the 13-year-old because she disappeared after her first customer, but he was selling these girls for $200, and he had already sold them multiple times since midnight in the 12 hours from the time he posted the ad to the time we got there. So very common scenario, lots of money to be made, and again, in a criminal activity that's got low risk of detection unless law enforcement is on point and looking at ads and looking for this type of activity. I know that video said the average age is 11. In my experience, I think it's closer to 14. 11 would be the low end. For a 17-year-old, 11-year-old, you're looking at average of 14, which is an 8th grader. But again, very young ages for victims in the United States. With some of the new revisions we had in the legislature, trafficking of a 12-year-old or younger in the state of Montana used to carry a 100-year sentence. It now carries a 50-year sentence with the revisions they did in the last legislature. But either way, trafficking of a 12-year-old gives you some pretty serious time in state court now. So pimps can make a lot of money. Obviously, we talked about how quick it can go, but $100,000 a year on one girl, adult or juvenile. And in this game, there is a demand for young-looking females. So if she's actually a minor or she's a young-looking adult, that is one category that would fetch additional money for people that are looking. So in prostitution, that people have a tendency to think it's no big deal, it just happens, the girls want to do it and the guys are doing it. That's absolutely incorrect. If you think about it, if you're a person who has sexual desires for children, being able to buy children online through sex trafficking or commercial sex can fulfill that desire. So prostitution is not good in any aspect of the crime or what it brings to a community. So wherever you have a demand for commercial sex, you are going to have sex trafficking. So not all prostitutes are victims of sex trafficking, but if they have a pimp, they usually are. So, and girls in this life may have a pimp for a period, get away from him. Maybe she's on her own for a bit, she gets another one. It's just a trend that it's very difficult for her to get out of. It's hard to get out of the life once you get into it. So again, minor prostitutes almost always are going to be victims of sex trafficking, especially young ones, because kids don't come up with this idea on their own. Somebody has taught them this or is exploiting them. So talking about indicators, we'll go over these. And if you guys have questions as we're going, you don't have to wait till we wrap up. But sex traffickers target vulnerable people within our community, homeless people, people with addiction issues, mental health issues, and they will manipulate and persuade and coerce them in many different ways to get into the sex industry. Sex trafficking is often found in a variety of locations or venues within a community, and ours is no exception. You know, obviously we don't have brothels here, but we do have massage parlors and strip clubs, and you know, where these places, the business that is occurring there, oftentimes legal, oftentimes also includes commercial sex. So truck stops are another location. I know, I think it was last year or the year before, Missoula County Sheriff's Department responded to a report of 2 females looking as young as 12 or 13 that were going from truck to truck, talking to drivers just out here at the Y. So another example of this happening in our community that we're just usually not aware of. Online escort services, which I'm going to talk to you about at the end, are by far the most common way that commercial sex is occurring in our community. So usually people don't realize the extent of commercial sex and that's occurring in their community. It's usually occurring at a greater frequency than most people realize, and oftentimes, sometimes greater than law enforcement realizes, because if they're not understanding what they're seeing. So the police department, as well as the FBI, has taken a zero tolerance approach to this. Missoula PD has been a front runner in the state of Montana in both education and work in these cases. You know, I've trained over 2,000 law enforcement officers and prosecutors in the states of Washington, Idaho, and Montana since 2014. So getting the word out and getting people to understand that what is sex trafficking, and it's not just prostitution, that there's people being victimized here, is very important for law enforcement and the justice system to understand. So we talked about this, and this happens quickly, and once it happens, it's hard to back out of it. But when a person has been disconnected from their family, and that usually occurs with separation. So sometimes it can be from Missoula to Bozeman or Spokane to Missoula, and it's not that far, but you think, well, you know, she had a cell phone, why didn't she call 911? Why didn't she call her family? Why didn't she call her friends? Why didn't she ask for help? But that isolation is very real to these victims, and oftentimes their cellular device gets broken or destroyed because they're going to get provided one that he can control. So, and as I said before, is once you get someone to engage in shameful behavior that they do not want their family to know about, then that usually cuts the ties completely with their family. So a minor who has stopped attending school, there's obviously a variety of reasons why kids stop going to school. It's very important why SROs are on point on this issue in their schools, and they're checking and seeing why kids are missing school, because sometimes it is that they're a victim of exploitation or sexual assault. Sudden dramatic change in behavior, as we all know with kids, that usually means something has changed in their life. So drug use, sexual assault, gang activity, sex trafficking, something has caused this drastic change in behavior. And if you're a person who they trust, it's important to inquire and see what's going on in their life. A minor engaged in commercial sex. Again, if you got a 14 or 15-year-old and she's caught engaging in prostitution or commercial sex, she should be treated as a victim because she didn't come up with this. She might be engaging in commercial sex at that time, but somebody is exploiting her. As I've said, that kids don't come up with this idea on their own. Disoriented or confused, showing signs of physical abuse. We know that physical abuse is common with people who exploit women, and so injuries consistent with domestic abuse is going to be consistent with these type of victims. What do you think you might see in some type of these injuries that you might see that an average person or a nurse or a hotel clerk or the police could see? What do you think you'd see as injuries? Black eyes. What else? Bruising. And where would you expect bruising?
Torso hidden.
Yeah, maybe around the throat. What about their shoulders? Because people are shaken and squeezed, right? Hit, broken ribs. Cigarette burns are very common, that they burn these girls with cigarettes. And so, yes, those are the things you'd be looking for that would draw attention to yourself. And then coupled with that, when you try to talk to her about it, she's probably going to be very reluctant to talk about it and is not going to want to talk about it. Are they fearful or timid, submissive? Obviously, you see this when you're talking to people in a variety of situations. That should draw attention, especially if the person they're with, they appear to defer to speak for them. They can't get away from this other person. We were working an operation, went into this hotel, and there was an obvious pimp and prostitute at the soda machine when we went in to set up, and after we got to the room, went back and talked to the clerk about them and asked if he knew who they were. He did. Asked him a little bit about him, and he said, they come down here almost every hour, and he gets her a Diet Coke. She loves Diet Coke. So that little thing that he said rang true to me. What did you catch from that? Every hour, what? He gets her a Diet Coke. So he doesn't even trust to give her $1 to go downstairs by herself to the soda machine because he is absolutely controlling of her. So there again, someone who's fearful or timid doesn't appear able to talk or be by themselves in situations that would be normal. A lot of these situations, because these girls consider the people that are exploiting them their boyfriend, as you deal with them, you would see that this is not normal behavior for a relationship. Not just unhealthy, because there's sometimes unhealthy relationships that we see, but you're going to see things that are not normal for a relationship. What would be one that would jump right out at you? When a girl tells you that her boyfriend has her go on dates. Not normal for girls or guys to let their girls have sex with other people, right? So if he sets dates up for me and, I go on these dates, things like that, and, things that don't seem normal. If you see something that seems, that doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. And it's best that you contact law enforcement, because sometimes it only takes one person, one citizen, one nurse, one officer on a traffic stop, one hotel clerk, one Uber driver that sees this person, recognizes her as a victim of something, and they get law enforcement involved. It only takes one sometimes just to get this person out of a terrible, terrible situation. So we really encourage you getting involved. And it feels like anymore our society, especially with kids, they kind of have this don't get involved attitude, and that does not work in many different examples of community policing. It most definitely doesn't work here. We need to get involved. When something doesn't seem right, you need to get involved. We need to try to help these people because they're not going to ask for it on their own because they don't identify as victims. So we talk about freedom of movement. You know, let's say in an ER setting where that boyfriend will not let her talk to the nurse by herself. He will not wait in the waiting area. He's adamant, you know, let's get the antibiotics for her and let's go. We got to go. We got to go. He's pressing and not letting her, you know, be what would be normal contact with a nurse. A minor who's with unrelated, non-age appropriate people. So again, you can see lots of situations. Well, there's an explanation. That's great. That's for the police to figure out. But if you see this and it doesn't look right and she doesn't seem to be acting right, and maybe you're in a hotel going to Glacier and you see a female who doesn't seem to be okay with the older non-related person they're with, and that catches your attention while you're looking at rafting information by the elevator waiting to talk to the clerk. I mean, just situations like this where you might find yourself where you're just in an environment where you come across these victims. Denied food and sleep and water. Sometimes people would think, oh, that's ridiculous. Did that happen? It totally happens, and especially sleep deprivation. So these girls are not getting good cycles of sleep, very common. They're very tired. They have dark circles under their eyes and because they're working 24/7. So they're also traveling on an interstate circuit, and they're not engaging in the type of tourist type things that people do in your community. So I've a couple times had girls, you know, you're on East Broadway in the middle of the night or North Reserve and you're talking to a female and she has no idea where she's at. And you think, well, you're in Missoula, Montana. How do you not know Montana? You know, there's Butte and Helena and Great Falls and Billings and Bozeman and Kalispell. Well, she doesn't know because she's not from here, and she's just traveled day after day after day after week after month down the freeway, stopping at hotels, working out of those hotel rooms, maybe having a smoke at the door of the hotel and on to the next city. Plus she's probably high on meth or heroin. And so, you know, when you run into a victim and she's so out of it, she has no idea where she's at, that's pretty compelling. Talked about this, deferring to someone to speak for her. Someone who seems to be in control of the situation, or they don't have control, somebody is controlling them. And again, you know, you could see that in a variety of ways. You could see that at a park. You could see that outside of a hotel, or a situation where a female does not seem to be okay with her situation. So I know I commonly say female. There are male victims of sex trafficking. I don't want to be dismissive of that. Males and females are both victims of trafficking. Primarily, though, we deal with female victims. Does a person appear to be coached? So, and this comes to contacts with law enforcement or some form of authority, because they know that there's consequences if they give up their current situation. So they're commonly trying to end this contact and give a story that seems to be well rehearsed and maybe doesn't make sense. So sometimes those little details that you would think in and of themselves is not that telling, can be very telling. So, on a traffic stop where two females and you separate them and one says they're coming from Billings and one says they're coming from Boise. Which one is it, and why is there a differentiation from that? So little things, nuances like that in conversation, and then you all are in different occupations and come in contact with people, but in listening how people talk and things that just don't seem right again, do they seem like they're believable or their stories? Person living in unsuitable conditions. I had a case where a female was brought to another city in Montana, and she was forced to engage in commercial sex in a vacant trailer. She was able to get away from there, and that location was about 160 miles from Missoula. We could not verify it through the investigation, but had we been able to, I would have driven there to document this location, because even though we had her statement, of her saying that here's a vacant trailer with no running water and people not living there, and mattresses that are just in the bedrooms where commercial sex is occurring, I would have taken the time to drive that far to take photographs to show that, hey, look at this environment, this terrible, nasty mattress with condoms and hypodermic needles and body fluids is not a location where a female is likely going to engage in consensual sexual activity. So things that are going to show that this is not something that someone's going to choose to do on their own because they're deplorable situations. So when you think about unsuitable conditions and you think, well, third world countries, obviously, yes, but there is that situations in our state too. Does a person lack personal possessions? Not to be appearing to be in a stable living condition. Commonly living out of a car, living out of a rental car, and traveling from city to city to city. So sometimes they would, maybe a location is rented, like a trailer or a apartment, and they could operate out of that location too. So oftentimes people see behavior that is consistent with drug activity, frequent quick visits, people acting shady or parking in the alley or coming at night and coming and going from a certain location. Those people in that location not interacting with the neighbors as they normally would. Maybe someone who shows up in a Chrysler 300 every weekend and he's there for a day but he's gone again. Different girls that are rotating through this location would all be good indicators. Bruising and injury, which we talked about, various stages of healing. So let's talk about how this is done, how pimps do this. So we know that they target vulnerable females, homeless, runaways, are very exploitable, but abusive homes, substance abuse, mental health issues, and poverty. So especially on Indian reservations, poverty plays a role in Montana, and the lure of something better, the money, the coercion, the lies that are going to be that, hey, I can do better for you and you deserve better, let me be the one to give you that. And then she's hopeful, but that's not what plays out. Oftentimes these girls are desperate for attention and desperate for someone to love them. So when someone says, I love you, that's very a catching phrase that leads to their commitment or loyalty to this person. And I like to say that, if you have a daughter, you should be telling her from a very young age how beautiful she is, how much you love her, how worthy she is, how capable she is, how she should be able to do anything. Because if you as a parent are not telling your daughter this, and the first time she hears this is when she's 13, 14, or 15, and some pimp is saying that to her at the mall or at a gas station where she stopped to get gas or some other situation, if that's the first time she's hearing it, if she's lacking that, you can see how alluring that would be to a young female to hear those weird words that she is lacking. It's very unfortunate. He will very quickly turn to how beautiful she is, talking about how sexy she is, and then trying to get her to engage in sexual tryouts and things to see if she's willing to listen to him and can do things. So getting in their head, like I said, it happens every single situation. They get in their head. So they lead these girls to believe that they're loved, that they're the only person that cares about them. They distance them from their families, make them dependent, and then lead them to believe that if anything happens to me, what's going to happen to you, because I'm the only one taking care of you. So supplying them with drugs, or that concept of payback that, last week when I found you at the bus stop, you had nowhere to go, I bought you clothes, I gave you a place to stay, I take care of you, and now I'm asking you to do this for me. We just need to make a little money. So he starts to give her guilt trips and why she should do this to him, and she doesn't want to do this, obviously. And so those guilt trips will vary in degree and maybe involve violence to get her to do what he wants. That drug addiction, especially with heroin, creates a tether to this person, because Now he doesn't even have to go hands-on with her, because if she doesn't want to do what he wants her to do, it's very easy to deny her heroin and lock her in the bathroom for a day or a night, and then she gets sick. She's getting dope sick, and now he takes that point of heroin and he's like, "You're going to be a good girl now," and gets her to do what he wants. So the drug addiction is almost always there. Eventual threats of violence, and not only to her, they might say, I know who your brother is, I know what middle school he goes to, I could tell your parents, I could send these pictures I took of you and me together, or these chat messages to your dad, and he will persuade her or manipulate her to be compliant that way. A couple different times where a female will, with her first customer, finds herself being raped, and then the pimp will come in and push the guy off and protect her and take her out of that situation, and just sets the hooks deeper into her of him being her protector, because she didn't realize that first customer was just another pimp, and it's a game they play to set her up, so she believes that he is protecting her and he wouldn't let something happen to her. It's common. Taking her identification and threatening to inform her family. So again, let's say a trooper makes a traffic stop, or a deputy on a rancher with expired registration, and in the car there is the rancher and maybe 3 Hispanic males, and during that contact he determines that these 3 work for him, that they're from in Jalisco, Mexico, they're the good workers, and maybe they smile, maybe they nod, whatever. The trooper or the deputy asks for ID. The rancher gets his ID, the vehicle registration, grabs their IDs out of the middle console, gives them to him. He runs all the names, and no one's wanted or missing, and he gives them a break on that expired registration. What's the telltale sign that was just right there? He had their IDs. Yep. So there's really no reason for any adult to have another adult's IDs. And yes, sometimes I guess a boyfriend could have his girlfriend's, but that's one of the telltale signs of when somebody possesses somebody else's ID. There's really no reason for that. So the loyalty that these victims will display is, I like to say that, you deal with a domestic abuse victim, they're difficult to deal with. A trafficking victim is 10 times worse than a domestic abuse victim. They don't see themselves as a victim, and they've been groomed, and they're resistant to law enforcement help, and they have this sense of loyalty that's second to none to their abusers. So a couple different pimp concepts, if you will. Guerrilla pimps and finesse or Romeo pimps. Guerrilla pimps, as you can imagine, are the ones who are mean and violent, and they get the girls to be compliant through violence. The vast majority are what I like to call finesse or Romeo pimps, and they play this game of courtship that leads her to believe that they're her boyfriend and they love her, and then that's where the manipulation happens. It's very, very common that they will play this game of manipulation and persuasion until she won't do what they want, and then they will get violent with her. So if you understand trauma bonding, which we don't have time to talk about, trauma bonding plays a great big role in these victims with their abusers. It's common for pimps to get girls to recruit their friends, their sisters, their cousins, to recruit other girls. So he will try to get them to bring prospective victims to him so he can talk to them. This happens very quick too. I mean, another incident here in Missoula, 3 females from a local high school who were at Southgate Mall after school one day, and a pimp starts talking to one of them. And, if 3 girls walk by and he says something, whatever he says to them, and 2 keep walking and one says, "What'd you say?" Who's he going to focus on? He's going to focus on the one that just gave him the opening, because he's a master manipulator and he's going to talk. And he starts talking to this girl, and her friends finish their shopping, come back, they're like, "Let's go." And she's like, "No, I'm good." She's like, "What do you mean? Look at him. He's no good for you. Let's go. He's creepy." And she said, "No, I'll be okay." And, he met her at 4 in the afternoon. Later that night, by midnight, he had her back at his apartment, had engaged in sex with her, and early that morning, the next day, he had already posted her on Backpage, and she was posted. And so that investigation led to him being charged and convicted, and that pimp, for reference, while he was on probation for trafficking that juvenile, I got him on another promotion of prostitution charge in fall of 2018, where he continued to do it again. So pimps are master manipulators. They're good at what they do. There's lots of money to be made, and in my experience, they're not going to stop unless they're in jail or they're in the ground. So they are going to look for females to exploit in every situation that's possible. Social media plays a big role in this, as does the internet. So how does this work? Obviously, supply and demand, right? We all know what that is. So the demand is created by consumers, or those customers who are willing to pay for commercial sex, and then that demand is met by a supply that is provided by a pimp or someone who's exploiting the women who are desired. So, this economic example continues, and just like with drugs, if there's a greater demand for something, prices are high, and once supply exceeds demand, prices drop. So what someone can pay for in Missoula, Bozeman, or Billings is less than what they're going to pay for in the Bakken, for example. When the Bakken was booming, prices for drugs and girls were double and triple what they were in other cities. So pimps will take the girls where the money is, and then sex is a reusable commodity, and sex never goes out of demand. So commercial sex is never going to go away. I think on a community level, we can try to address this for our own community, but that's something that is not going to ever go out of demand. So asking you, what type of people do you think in our community are the people that engage in commercial sex? Who do you think?
We've got to have enough money to afford it.
Yep. So who are some of the people, do you think, in our community that engage in commercial sex? Anyone? Yeah, you could easily say everyone, right? I mean, that would apply. Yeah. So oil industry workers, which the Bakken's not in Missoula, but the Bakken's in eastern Montana and western North Dakota, and there's lots of other oil industry areas across the country, but that's one where the supply and the demand is met. How about the military? Who's been in the military here? Anyone? Okay, well, military bases within the United States as well as in other countries. Before I started doing this, I worked my first case in 2009, so 10 years now, and I remember, hearing stories from people in the military and in the Philippines or other military bases in other countries, and talking about going on R&R and what would be done in these locations, these clubs they would go to, and now it just makes me sick because that female, just again a product of the almighty American dollar and relegated to the poverty that she's in, is willing to compromise herself, or is being forced to compromise herself to engage in commercial sex. So again, no matter where she's at, she was somebody's little princess at some point, and she never aspired to be a commercial sex worker. Truck drivers, and I don't want to lump everyone into this. Obviously, there's some organizations, Truckers Against Trafficking is a great one, but people that are transient, and I'm not talking homeless bums, living under the bridges, just people that are transient to a community. That would be one reason why it's such an issue in an oil patch. But wherever you have a truck stop of any size, if it can support commercial sex, you're going to have sex trafficking. So even on some of the smaller communities in Montana, if there's a truck stop there, people are going to take girls there and try to exploit them at that location. People that attend conventions from out of town, sometimes people when they're out of town, they might act differently than they would in their own town, right? So that happens too. Sporting events, it's very common knowledge that the Super Bowl is one of many, but the Final Four, any large sporting events where there's increased commercial sex trafficking is increased at that location too, because again, the pimps are going to take the girls where the money is. migrant laborers in the Yakima Valley of Washington, Toppenish and Wapaho and Sunnyside, those areas where they have lots of migrant workers. They bring in females of that ethnic group to be there for commercial sex for the migrant workers as well, sexual tourists. So oftentimes in law enforcement, it depends where the jurisdiction is as to who can be charged with something. But in federal law, if you're a U.S. citizen and you travel abroad to another country for the intent to engage in sex with a child, you can be convicted in the United States. So that happens too. Here's a map from 2017 showing Polaris. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and if you want more information on what we've been talking about, Polaris is a very good source. But if you were to have the interstate freeways more prevalent on this map, you're going to see the vast majority of these locations involve the interstate freeway system. So as you see in Montana, you see that Missoula is prominent there, with multiple locations being in Montana. And again, these are calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. These are not reports by law enforcement. So I'm going to show you something that's probably going to surprise you. It surprised everybody I show this to, and I'm just going to give you a quick look at what's going on. This is all open source information. You can obviously check this out yourself. It's not against the law, it's open source. But if you type in Missoula escorts into Google, we're going to look at this last weekend. And from here we see a variety of websites. eBackpage, Backpage no longer exists, but there's several that are spin-offs from that. So eBackpage, simply like a online classified section that you can look for cars or people to mow your lawn or a musical instrument, or you can look for women. And so clicking here, you have to admit that or agree that you're over 18 and that you will report any suspected sex trafficking. And last weekend, you can see how many postings in Missoula were for this website. So if we take this top one, you can see right there, this girl is being posted by that phone number. All you have to do is call it, and her information's right there. So if that's who you get or you don't, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. She looked pretty young. Here's another one, bedpage.com. Again, women seeking men. You have to agree that you're 18. You can see again multiple listings for Missoula on this website last weekend, and then another young-looking female. So, and you can see what it will say there on her description of what she will do. And again, just simply calling that number. Backpagely was another one. 12 listings for Missoula. Clicked on one of those, and again, you can see that donation rate below her picture, 110 QV, so that's 110 for 15 minutes, 150 for half an hour, 220 for an hour. So again, it's pretty obvious what's going on with commercial sex. Skip the games is another very common one. Last weekend, you can see multiple listings in Missoula for this website, and clicking on one of those, you can see information about her, what she will do, and again, all you have to do is call a phone number. City X Guide has really taken off. Sometimes there's dozens of advertisements. If we were to pull this website up right now on a Thursday, I would bet there's dozens of postings tonight in Missoula, but this is last weekend and this is just the top. Again, you grab one, another young-looking female, and it will tell you, what she's willing to do simply by calling a phone number. So usually that surprises people, and people will say, well, if you know that's there, why aren't we working this? We could if we had a lot more police officers, and we try to, but this is occurring right here in Missoula, and most people are like yourselves who are good people, and you go to work each day, you go to dinner now and then, you shop at the same store, you go to a movie now and then, you have some friends that you socialize with, but you're not in the drug world, you're not in the commercial sex world, you're not a heroin user, and you're oblivious that in Missoula, Montana, and we're not unique to the other major cities in Montana, that this is out there, and it's out there all the time. So, like I said, if you type in Missoula escorts, you can check it out for yourself. But when it's that easy to engage in commercial sex right here in Missoula, and like I said, if there's a demand for commercial sex, there will be sex trafficking, and there is. So I'm curious, I always ask this, but by a show of hands, and I only showed you a few of them, who was surprised that that is the way it is right now in Missoula? Yeah, everybody seems to be. So through some stats up, and we'll wrap up and I'll answer some questions for you. The first number are through the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and again, if you want to do some additional checking, the Department of Justice as well as Polaris gives you a ton of information online. I put those slash or the Montana cases, so there are only 9 in 18, 26 and 17 cases that resulted from 57 contacts. So sometimes people can call Polaris, that 888-3737-888, and they're not obligated to contact law enforcement on behalf of the victim. This is how many cases I myself have worked since 2015, both state and federal cases. And again, people are usually surprised that there's that frequency, and this is a very underreported crime. But ever since trained our patrol officers in 2014, my cases have gone up exponentially because this is happening here, and when they have time, they are working it. So you can see how many cases in 17 and 18, and I also have 2 more cases that aren't on there for 19. So usually about 10 or 12 cases a year that I'm working myself. So we'll finish with, there's my contact information, and I'm right at 1 hour. So is there some questions I can answer for you? Kind of a heavy topic. I know it is, it always is, but we can't be oblivious to this going on in our community, no matter how difficult it is to face. But I mean, we need to know about it, and the police need the help of the community to deal with this.
So what avenues do the victims have to get out of that kind of cycle?
So Missoula has very good resources for victims. I think we're set up better than most every city in Montana. We have a variety of avenues and places to help these victims, but they're not specific to sex trafficking. So ideally, we would have a shelter here that would just be for sex trafficking victims, and that's something that is being worked on now. But victim services through the crime victim advocate, if they have been, come across during an investigation, or if they're come across through social services or some other entity that maybe the police don't get involved, through the hospital or something, that they are provided that way. The federal system, we have victim specialists in the FBI that help these victims on a very one-to-one basis. But yes, working with the victims is important. What's limiting for city resources is many of these victims are not from Missoula. So once they go back to Spokane or Vegas or Sacramento or Phoenix or Miami, it's very hard for us to keep track of them. So if it's a federal case, obviously the FBI is everywhere, so that helps. But if that's only going to be available during a federal case, which you have to prove an interstate nexus. So, yep.
Yes, Jeff Stevens, South 39th Neighborhood Council. How big a staff would you need working full-time to actually put a dent in this problem?
So we have an ICAC detective, and we have me, and we try to, I don't know, I can't put a number on that. If we had more detectives, we could do more. I mean, we have to prioritize. We have lots of violent crime in Missoula, and I don't know, we try to do what we can, and obviously try to be proactive with this. And I watch websites, and if I was looking one afternoon or one evening and I saw a particularly young looking female, I could probably call a few detectives, and we would try to go over a street crimes and try to make contact and try to rescue her. But we could always use more resources.
Obviously these people have calculated that their chances of getting away with it are good enough to continue doing business.
Exactly. So let's say I'm a pimp, and I have a girl right now, and it's Thursday, and I'm in Spokane, and I'm going to post online ads in Missoula, Butte, Bozeman, Billings, and I'm going to wait, I'm going to see. And let's say we get 4 responses from Missoula, we're going to head to Missoula. Let's say we don't get any tomorrow, and I don't get any ads from Butte, but I get 6 in Bozeman. There's no need to waste our time in Butte. We're going to go to Bozeman. And so they will just continue to post ads ahead, and then if they get to a place and it's busy, and they'll stay. And unfortunately, this is a crime with high yield, low detection, because they're online, and if law enforcement is not proactively looking for them, the chances of them come across them are pretty low. But that's also important why educating patrol officers and troopers, because these people are involved in a crime where they're traveling by vehicle, so they're susceptible to traffic stops, and we just need to know what we're looking for when we come across them, just like drug interdiction. Yep.
The disappearance of Indian women in this state, is it connected to this, do you think?
Yes, without a doubt. There are incidents of Native American females being trafficked. Are they disproportionate to the other races? I don't think so, but there is really, in Montana, the interstate freeway plays a big role in where this is occurring. So in the cities, and any city in America of any size that has a demand for commercial sex, this exists. But yes, has there been incidents on the Flathead Indian Reservation just north of Missoula? Yes, there has. Has there been incidents of girls being taken out of state and engaged in commercial sex? Yes, there has. So it does happen here, and Native American females are another group that is in demand, in which higher prices are paid for, and not just Native Americans, African Americans, Asians. Sometimes it just depends what is in demand depending on what market they're at.
I have 2 questions. My first one is related to the medical field, and I guess under what obligation are medical providers to bring, potentially a victim to the attention of law enforcement, especially if that woman is a, say, minority, non-English speaking, but an adult?
So we have educated, the lifeguard group recently educated Community Medical Center. I have worked with St. Pat's ER. We need to continue to do that. There's a private person who's working on a video training that can be used by medical professionals, but I would think that if a nurse believes they are dealing with a victim of a crime, just like if somebody came in with a gunshot or someone came in and they disclosed that they were the victim of a sexual assault, that they can report that. That's what I believe.
And then my second question is, obviously there's a customer base for this, especially if you're seeing, this many on a normal Thursday evening. And I was wondering if we had if you have a better idea of a local demographic breakdown, or what percentage of our population engages in purchasing people.
So I'm not sure, but I have no doubt if we run an undercover operation in which we pose as placing ads for young-looking females, I have no doubt that we would get multiple people respond to those ads in Missoula at any time that we do that. So we've ran those before. We'd like to do those more frequently because in a city this size, I would think that, if they are given the maximum penalty of $1,000 and maybe they go to jail for a week and their names are posted in the paper in a smaller community like this, I think we could create a deterrence here, and we could send a message that this will not be tolerated here, and then maybe the consumers would not be so flippant about it. I think that the internet, for example, before the internet, if you liked children, you knew something was wrong with you. It was a secret. It was hard to get in contact with children. It was hard to get child pornography, and you had to have a secret. Now with the internet, in the privacy of your own home, you have direct access to children. You have direct access to child pornography. You have ways that now you can meet children And I think not only the ease of that in the privacy of your own home allows it to happen, but I also think in their mind, they start to lessen that they think something's wrong with them because they start to associate in chat groups and stuff with other people, and they start to think, hey, there's lots of people out there like me. So I think the internet's great in a lot of ways, but the shadows of the internet can be very bad. And that's why I said, as a parent, I would seriously consider, I don't think there's any reason to give your child access to the internet in the privacy of their bedroom at night. It's just, there's nothing good to it. So having your kid, put their phone up whenever, and you decide what is right for your family and your child, but I can tell you that things are going on, especially people trying to exploit young females online, that would just blow your mind if you knew what was happening. And it's not happening in other places, it's happening here too, so. Yep.
Do you have the funding to at least temporarily protect the girls? Because you'd have to house them and protect them from the victim, from their abuser.
Yep, so we try to find them housing as best we can and get them help, medical treatment and even drug treatment if we can. So oftentimes, if a community, of which many in Montana do not, have specific services for sex trafficking victims, almost every place has domestic abuse services, right? So we can kind of adapt those to these girls, but for example, you do not want to have a secret location where you take domestic abuse victims in your community and you take one of these girls and put them where she has access to a phone where she contacts a pimp and now the whole place is compromised. So you have to be considerate about that. In some cases I've worked, we've tried to help them in communities where they go back to in the state of Montana. Tumbleweed in Billings is a facility that some of these girls from Missoula have gone to. But I guess that is, I don't know how Tumbleweed is continuing, but being in contact with them and sometimes getting them issues for their substance abuse is all it takes, and getting them reunited with their family. But we have to remember that to most of us, we think that home is a good place. But if a kid has ran away from home because it's not a good place for them, if everybody in authority from the police to the social workers is saying, I'm going to get you home, if they don't want to be at home, that's not a message they want to hear. So it's difficult. But these victims, as all victims are, but these especially, in my opinion, are well worth the effort and the extra effort it takes to help them, because they're in a terrible situation, and sometimes it only takes one of us, one knight in shining armor, if you will, to get this person out of a terrible situation.
Well, thank you for what you do and for this presentation. It's very illuminating.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. I do this job because I like helping people, so. Okay, yep.
Maybe we could end this on a lighter note. When I started college, there were talk about this gal who was a senior in college decided that she wanted to get out of the dorm and the sorority house, and she wanted to live by herself. So she went down to the Florence Hotel and saw the fellow who ran the elevator up and down, and she said, if you find someone who, well, here's my name and phone number. And a few days later, there was a traveling salesman traveling across Montana, and he stopped in Missoula and got off the train and walked to the Florence Hotel, and he checked in and he went to the elevator. And the fellow said, what floor? And he said, well, I was just wondering if you know of a gal who would be available for, oh yeah, sure. So he dropped him off at the 4th floor and went to the phone and phoned this number and said it's, room 412. And a short time later, she was at the door and she knocked on the door, and the fellow opened the door and she looked at him and said, Dad, what are you doing here?
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Well, I thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to speak and share this information and knowledge with you. And there's my contact information if you want to contact me. If you see something that's happening right away that needs a police response, simply call 911. A lot of people think that I don't want to call 911 because I might be tying the line up for emergency. There's like 6 or 7 dispatchers down there at any given time. They'll put you on hold if they have to, but calling 911 starts sometimes the process from the beginning, and that gets the police involved. So, you know, I'd much rather get involved and talk to someone in this situation and find out that it's not an issue than maybe missing that opportunity. So, thank you again. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a nomination for Neighborhood Project Funds Committee member. Jane?
Yes, Will McLaughlin stepped down from his leadership team, and so he was on the Grants Committee. So we need somebody who will volunteer to be on the Grants Committee. The Grants Committee meets as needed during the year. I try to kind of keep the grants together, so and try to have very brief meetings before City Council on a Monday, so that you meet a couple of times a year, and then you have the intense grants process during October when the large grants come in. And this year it's been changed that the large grants are allowed to be up to $6,000 instead of $3,000. We didn't get more money, we just changed the amount, and you all voted on that, I think, last month. And so anyway, it's very interesting and fun, and you get to go for a ride with me once a year and look at all the grant sites, and I try not to scare you too bad. But anyway, is there anybody who would like to be on the grant committee? Randall, you'll love it. Thank you, Randall. Is everybody okay? Does anybody else? Do we want to have a runoff? No? Okay, Randall, you're it. Thank you. I'll be in touch with you with more information. And we will be getting a new city council rep because Julie Armstrong is not running again, and there's 4 community forum members and 1 city council member. So we'll be looking forward to Brian tapping someone on the shoulder and asking them to come and join the committee. So thank you, Randall.
Do you want to handle the vote for Bryce? Jane?
Okay, so next up, Bryce Rowe has been on the agenda last month as a nominee as required by the bylaws, and he wants to be voted to be on the leadership team for Community Forum. So you want to take, is there a motion to accept Bryce to be on Community Forum leadership team?
So moved.
Jennifer, is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, Julie, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously, and we'll have to let him know that he is now the new leadership team member. So thank you.
Special events? Good. And staff report.
Okay, I'll start with that. We have the candidate forums have been organized, and I'll go through it quickly so you can see. The only thing that I'm waiting for to finalize it is the primary, to see who the final candidates are going to be, because we're not doing it before the primary, we're going to be doing it after. So each will have Ward 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4 together, 5 and 6 together. So they will all be held here in City Council chambers from 6 to 8 o'clock. Ward 1 and 2 is September 25th. Ward 3 and 4 is September 24th. And Wards 5 and 6 is September the 19th, 6 to 8 o'clock in each of them. So you can look at a map to see which ward you're in. Probably most of you already know that, and because they're like, Ward 1 has Heart of Missoula, Lower Rattlesnake, Marshall Canyon, North Side, West Side, and Upper Rattlesnake. And it only has a little bit of the west side, but there is a little snippet in there. So we'll be sending this out in the digest and having a press release, and hopefully it'll go out to all of the media outlets and it'll be picked up. And it will be recorded on MCAT also. So we have the League of Women Voters are going to come and moderate it, and so it'll be nice and fair and even keel for everyone, and that's the way we're able to put it on. I am looking for 2 volunteers to help bring snacks for wards 3 and 4, and someone else to bring snacks for wards 5 and 6. And see me later on, or send me an email if you would like to do that. It's just some light snacks, whatever you want. And the other 2 things that I have is, this is 2 wonderful events are coming up on September the 15th. Unfortunately, they're both on the same day, which just breaks my heart because I love to go to both. Sunday Streets, they close Higgins from the X's to 5th from 12 to 4 on Sunday, the 15th of September, and there's all kinds of activities on the way. You can walk, bike, skateboard, roller skate, incumbent bike, whatever you want. And that's a lot of fun. We will be working the Stories and Stones, though, and that's at the cemetery. That's from 12:30 to 3:30. And if you've never been, people act as historical interpreters, and they pretend that they are the person in the ground and will tell stories about them, like Jeanette Rankin is one. There's Sky King was buried there. The Karras family is represented usually. Higgins is represented. So what you do is they continually tell the story, so you go around and you can listen to all the different stories that there are and take pictures, and it's really a fabulous event. And
Could you restate the date, please?
Yes, it's September 15th. And if you happen to volunteer for this, you will have enough time to go around and visit everything, because our shifts are short, and that's coming up next. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Karen, do you have a report?
Yes, I actually have a sign-up sheet for anyone who's interested in helping us at that Stories and Stone tabling. Please sign up to help us. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Now with the neighborhood council reports, we can start over here. Doug, are you ready? If you're ready.
Well, in the last month I mentioned the forest fire up the Rattlesnake, and I'm not sure if it's finally out or not, but it seemed like it went on for at least 3 or... Has anyone heard of any report about... I know they decided to let people go up there, but is the fire out now? I haven't heard any official report. Anyway, there was a story in the Missoulian about the Beescove fire, and it talked about Mr. Beescove. And I was kind of incensed that William Coyote Bill Beescove, born 1839 and died in 1916, claimed to be the mayor of the Upper Rattlesnake, and I thought I was the only person who was audacious enough to claim that, but I guess he got ahead of me, so maybe I'm the second mayor of the Upper Rattlesnake. Another another thing that's happened is 2 houses north of me was up for sale, and the Rattlesnake Creek runs through the backyard, and there was a nice house there that was originally built by A.J. Gibson, the architect for the courthouse and Main Hall, and it has only been, as I remember, through 3 hands, the 3 owners, and the last owner, both the husband and the wife, died about 10 days apart, and the kids put the house up for sale, and a developer bought it, and we were just shown the plans. In the front yard on the south side of the house, there will be 3 additional living spaces, or duplexes or something. And on the garden area on the north side of the house, that area will have 2 additional houses on it. So that one lot now, when it's all done, instead of having 1 house, we'll have 6. And the people that, the last owner, Dr. Hal Brown, B-R-A-U-N, was such a conservationist, and at City Council last Monday I mentioned that he was so involved in trying to conserve Montana that he bought a large section of land here around this area. And a couple of, maybe 20 years ago, there was an article about all the wonderful things he had done, and he explained how he had done these things so the rest of us who owned land out in the country could maintain the land in its best shape. And so that's what's happening on the west side of the Rattlesnake Creek, and I don't know if the Rattlesnake Fire is out on the east side. That's all the news I have. Thank you very much, and that's from the Missoula's best neighborhood.
Jennifer, is that right? University District, we're on hiatus for the summer. With Jane's help, we're trying to get the sign up, getting Bonner Park and the RX Trail system, and talking about perhaps some adult exercise facilities in the park. But we'll be meeting again in about 2.5 weeks, the 1st of September.
Carol Garlington, Moose Can Gully. We have had no meeting in the past month, and our next meeting jointly with the South 39th Street leadership team will be on September 23rd, and that's all I have. Thank you.
For Captain John Mullen, we had our leadership team meeting just this Monday on the 19th, and we talked about, there's a lot of things going on in our neighborhood, mostly new developments, where there is a request, I suppose, or an application to change the rezone for Hellgate Meadows, about 57.5 acres. So that's kind of the area east of Flynn and north of Mullen is kind of right by that empty space after the apartments. I think they're wanting to change the rezone into a more denser population, I guess, or higher density than what it is right now, which I think is a special district. And so we're keeping a close eye on that. I think, it's something that, at least from our general feelings, I feel like the leadership team and I think most of the residents there are probably going to be opposed to that rezone. We're also keeping an eye on the Remington Flats development that's coming north of the 44 Ranch, and also the Heron's Landing south of 44 Ranch. So there's a lot of things going on. Although also on Monday, the City Council approved a budget, and I'm happy to report that the 44 Ranch Park, thing that we've been bringing up from time and time again, has been fully funded. So thank you, City Council and Mayor. And that's all I have from Captain Jamal. Thank you.
At our last meeting, the River Road leadership team planned the next general meeting, which will be on September 11th at 6 p.m. at Garden City Harvest for the River Road neighborhood.
Randall Gunn, north side, west side. We just had our general meeting about a week and a half ago. I can't remember. I was very tired. We talked about some upcoming work on affordable housing developments, officially adopted as a neighborhood, taking up the First Street Pocket Park near the pedestrian bridge, and talked with some people from the, I can't remember the name of the organization, the Move Missoula, the Cycle Missoula. Do you remember what they were? Missoula in Motion, yes, about a survey project for areas on the west side in a certain neighborhood. And it was a great turnout. That's pretty much it.
Julie Devlin Rose Park. We met last night for a regular monthly meeting, and we mainly wanted to finalize plans for our general meeting in Rose Park on Sunday, the 8th. And there are quite a few, it's quite a long agenda. If anybody wants to know or find out what it is, you know, just let us know. And we approved the postcard. It's going to go out to hopefully Monday. And Karen brought us a PA system so people can hear us there. And then we discussed building the new playground at Rose Park. And we worked all day last Saturday, and it's beautiful. I went over there afterwards. I took my grandson yesterday, and there was a whole preschool, I guess, a play group, and they were really enjoying it. And we want to thank, there were 80 volunteers, and we really want to thank them all, especially Blue Cross Blue Shield. They came both Thursday and Saturday from Helena, all the way from Helena, and they made up the majority of the volunteers. And some volunteers were from, let me think, Parks and Recs, and then there was a congregation called the Light of the World. They had quite a few volunteers too. And Karen at our meeting gave us the remaining Slant Street Gateway grant funds. She gave us the news that they'd been approved for a change of scope to assist with the project, and they'd been paid out. So that's all completed. That's it. We'll have our next meeting. It's always the day before this meeting. So this meeting is the 26th, so it'll be the 25th. Thank you.
Jeff Stevens, South 39th Street Neighborhood Council, reporting from one of Missoula's more beleaguered neighborhoods at the moment. How many of you are familiar with the Hillview Crossing townhome development? I know you are. Yes, I know you are. Yeah. I think most of you are. Well, I have some new developments to report. And I'll just give you a little bit of background information. A few months ago, the City Council Land Use and Planning Committee requested that the developer for this project prepare an updated soil stability and stormwater studies in advance of approval. They also voted an increase in street width from 28 to, I think it was 34 or 35. Do you recall which? I think one or the other. It was a fairly substantial increase, but anyway, let's say 35. Anyway, the developer objected strenuously to both these requirements and ultimately did nothing to pursue this study for months. Thus, an impasse has resulted. The developer recently threatened legal action, and following that, the mayor decided to step into the process with a proposal to rescind the study requirement and reduce the road width. Enough pressure was put on enough council members to apparently achieve this goal. At the most recent meeting last week, which was not covered by the Missoulian, the additional study requirement was rescinded. The street width requirement will be discussed and voted on next month. Teresa Jacobs, who's from our neighborhood, and I met with the mayor on Tuesday. In our conversation, he placed blame for the impasse directly at the feet of John DeBari, who was the chairman of that committee. He described his actions as obstructionist. And of course, a majority of the committee had voted for this requirement, not just Mr. DeBari. In essence, the mayor has intervened on behalf of the developer on this matter, and we find this a rather disturbing development. And that's not all. Also, the issue of proper meeting notification has arisen, and we're investigating whether there might be a problem in this area. Before the meeting, this document was issued describing the meeting date and time, and mentions that the Hillview Crossing will be discussed. This is followed by an 83-item list of all the documents that have been presented and discussed leading up to this time. But nowhere on this agenda was there actual mention of what specific issues related to this project were to be discussed, or whether or not there was going to be any action taken on these issues. And I found that a little strange at the time. A few days after the meeting, this document showed up. This is an agenda, again describing that meeting, but on this agenda, under committee business, there is a recommended motion for the stormwater plan listed specifically. So this really piqued my curiosity because this agenda was nowhere in evidence before the meeting. So I paid a visit to the city clerk's office, and there they told me that the agenda that I most recently showed you, the revised agenda, was created after the meeting, and that they were unable to create a more specific agenda before the meeting because of a lack of information on the exact development-related issues that would be discussed and possibly voted on. However, I'd like to note that this meeting was August 14th. On August 9th, the mayor wrote a letter outlining the issues he wanted the council to revisit and discuss. In other words, specific information existed that should have been included in the agenda before the meeting. And we find this very disturbing, and we are continuing to investigate this and find out why this procedure was used. And that's about all the news from Lake Wobegon. Thank you.
Kate Laney, Two Rivers. We did have what we might call a general meeting on July 31st, an attempt to have a general meeting. 3 people showed up, and we elected 2 of them to be on the leadership team. We also made a decision, because Two Rivers is a very disjointed neighborhood. It's little pockets of things here and there. There's not like a really big cohesive neighborhood. We're going to try to combine with Franklin for the Fort, and I'm going to go to their leadership team meeting on September 10th so we can further discuss if maybe we can combine with them. And we also, it didn't seem, I had mentioned to most of the people in my neighborhood earlier in the summer that this was coming up, and several of them were looking forward to it, but nobody got cards alerting them to the meeting. So I don't know what the process is to get notifications out to people, but maybe we can talk about that. Because even if we combine with the other neighborhood, we have to have a way to let people know that there are meetings going on. Okay, that's it.
Colleen Beal, Lewis and Clark. As always, we're busy about our little pond, but we are planning a general meeting this September 4th. We're having an update on what we've accomplished in Bancroft Ponds Park, and are looking forward on our next couple projects. We have a large birding area that will be planted in probably October. The funds were given to us, and the idea from the Audubon, the Five Valley Audubon. So it's been great to work with them. And we also we'll have to elect new people, so I think, Jane, you know I'll run again. That's it for Lewis and Clark.
Ed Nolder, Riverfront Neighborhood. We postponed our August leadership team meeting until September 9th at the Dog and Bicycle Cafe in the Old Sawmill District. As you may know, we had the Mumford and Sons concert at Osprey Stadium, and it was quite destroyed in a way by the 13,000 people that were at the concert, and with all the weather and the wet weather, and it got pretty soggy. I don't know if any of you guys went to the concert. It was great. We did have a meeting. We have a stadium task force meeting in part of our leadership team for the Riverfront neighborhood, and we had a meeting on Monday, and it was great to have Logjam Presents have 2 representatives there for our meeting to talk about how the concert went for them, if they had any concerns with our neighborhood and how it went, and if we ever had any comments or any complaints. And you know, on their end, they said that they had no problems at all, that it went really well. Unfortunately, the weather was kind of that was a problem, but they really, we can't do much about that. And we didn't have any problems really in our neighborhood, and so we feel they handled it very well. And as far as picking up all the litter, the noise, all those different items. There was no complaints. We do get probably, from what I've heard, which is kind of funny, we do get more complaints about the baseball games in our neighborhood. And the announcer and all that people are just get irritated by all that. But there was no problems with the concert, and there looks like they'll have 3 or 4 concerts there every summer. And so far, we've had our stadium task force committee set up in case another company comes in, like Logjam Presents, and so there'll be some rules set into place about parking and pedestrian use and all that, and because they closed down Wyoming Street in the during that concert, which was great, so didn't have a lot of traffic. They are going to restripe 5th and 6th Streets between Russell and Higgins, I think next month, and to make it more pedestrian, bicycle useful and more safe too. That's also going on. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Mark Foss, Southgate Triangle.
Excuse me, we have a question for him.
I hate to interrupt you, Mark, but I do have an observation on your report. Years ago, I served on the original Stadium Use Agreement Committee before the stadium was ever built. And at that time, the baseball representatives, there was discussion then about other events taking place in the stadium. And at that time, the baseball representatives expressed considerable concern about having too large an event in that stadium that would infringe too much on the outfield. And I can see that their concerns have been amply borne out in this most recent development. Certainly, if the weather had stayed dry, this problem would probably not exist. But the fact of the matter is that we have no control over the weather in a situation like this. And they're obviously going to have to take some very serious steps to prevent and mitigate this problem in the future. And I don't know if there's any particular solution to it beyond actually putting in artificial turf in that stadium that wouldn't be destroyed in a situation like this, because I know it's a city-owned facility, and they like to be able to host as many events in there as possible, which is a good thing. But obviously, the primary function of that stadium is for playing baseball, and if they can't play baseball there, you got a real disaster on your hands. So I think there needs to be a very serious discussion about what to do about this problem in the future. That's all I've got.
Can I ask you a question about the fireworks? Will there be, we find them very troublesome, dogs and babies in our family. I mean, we don't even live in your neighborhood, but we can hear them so loud. Is there going to be one more at the end, I hope, and no more between now and the end of the season?
I believe, Ed from Riverfront Neighborhood, I believe that we're all done for this year. They only scheduled 4 for every summer. The stadium, I believe, originally they would like to do 7, but they compromised on 4. And they're usually published before the season starts what dates those will be, so people can
Yeah, but you can't. What are you going to do with your dog and your baby? I mean, you can't.
Yeah, the stadium, that is an issue we have with some of that's definitely something that comes up.
Thank you. I just hope you're
They've compromised at 4
aware.
and try to let everybody know ahead of time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark Foss, Southgate Triangle. We had our general meeting August 6th at Boyd Park. Turnout wasn't very big, but the people that did turn out were new people to the neighborhood, so that was promising. We continued to work on Bellevue Park, and other than that, that's it for me, so take us home, Julie Devlin.
Heidi is going to give the city council liaison a report.
So I brought some graphics that the mayor's office made that kind of highlight some of the things that are now, since we approved the budget Monday night. In the budget, there's a couple of things that I wanted to highlight that aren't specifically broken out on that I think are really exciting additions to our budget this year. And one of them is $50,000 that hopefully will be matched by the county so hopefully $50,000 from them as well for providing winter shelter this winter for folks that are homeless. Obviously, we had a really bad winter last winter, and this was a really big issue that we grappled with. And this, we don't know how it's going to be used yet, but it'll give us some funding to come up with solutions. Yes, Jane?
Is it a wet shelter?
I believe, well, I don't know what it'll look like. So last winter, the solution was to temporarily, open the bus shelter for a while and then take people over to the Salvation Army, and anybody could stay, because if it's so cold, you can't just turn people out. And so I don't think how that's going to be spent or where it's going to be has been defined yet. But folks that are, working with them, hopefully we'll come up with something better this year and more predictable. And then two other things was a partner, funding for 2 community partners that help us reach our zero waste goals and our climate change preparedness. So Home Resource received some funding, and so did Climate Smart. And I think those are really exciting. They do important work that we all benefit from. And then I also just wanted to briefly mention that the TIF districts did very well this year. So the city as a whole grew 18% in the tax base. The TIF districts grew 53%. The URD 3 and 2 had the most growth in their value, and as a result, we're actually taking a $2.8 million remittance from those MRA districts, and then those are split out between all of the taxing jurisdictions. So the city gets a portion of that, the county gets a portion of that, and the schools gets a portion of that. So I think that's super exciting. The city is using its portion to help build the general fund balance, but the schools actually have to reduce the amount of mills that they are putting on our property taxes, so we'll actually see a reduction in mills on the school side as a result of that, in addition to a reduction in the mills on the city side. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. Oh, and one more thing, I did want to say that the Hillview Way project is going to be back in committee. We did not pass it out of committee last week, or was that just last week? So we had tentatively talked about having it back in committee September 11th, but I'm not sure if that worked for the developer. And I'd have to double check my emails to see what's going on. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on the Hillview Way scheduling, I understand that the meeting change is being contemplated for the 18th, is that correct? Yeah, it may work for the developer, but it's not going to work well for me or my neighbors. We've got some serious scheduling conflicts. I'm going to be tied up with something that I can't get away from. Our neighbor who's participated very heavily in this project is going to be out of town. We had anticipated, had our schedule cleared for the 11th, and there was one other person in the neighborhood that won't be able to attend either. So we got some serious concerns, and I know this is a very important meeting that's coming up. So anyway, I'll have a discussion with some other people in the city and see what can be done. And now getting to tax increment financing, I was one of the original advocates for tax increment financing, the first district back in the 70s, and I think it's been a remarkably successful program. I know there's been a lot of criticism recently out in the community regarding this, but they know not what they speak of. It's did incredible things for the redevelopment of the downtown and any neighborhood that it's gone into. And, there can be controversies about who it goes to, but a properly administered program, that money is, if it's distributed fairly, it can go to small businesses, big corporations. They can't play favorites, But I do have some concern about this money becoming a popular cash cow for other projects beyond redevelopment. And I realize that the program has been very successful this past year and that there is money available for other things, but I would caution the city not to become overly dependent and reliant on that year after year, because that's not what that money was intended for primarily. And we need to make sure that there's enough money left in those accounts to properly fund whatever demands are made by development and improvements in the community. And that's just my word of caution. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else? Doug?
Where is the sign-up sheet for the Stories in Stone? Okay, well,
Don't see it.
you're supposed to go that way, but Jane needs one more person to sign up for that. It's 2:30 to 3:30. I want you to open up your book here and notice that the first thing here is map, and the next thing is neighborhood brochure. Take a look. Pull out the neighborhood brochure and take a look at it. Okay, everyone got their neighborhood brochure out? And I want you to take a look at the bottom. And here we are at the Stories in Stone event. And it's a lot of fun out there. If you haven't been out there for this event, you really should come out and spend an hour with us, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to sign up for, well, Jane, what did they sign up for?
12 to 2.
No, I'm talking about the publication that they can pick up on the internet or on the computer. Neighborhood.
Oh, the digest. We put it in the digest so you can see about it. We still need two more volunteers on here from 12 to 2 and from 1:30 to 3. Should I pass it around again?
And so take this, is it okay if they take this home, Jane, and read through it very carefully and really understand? This was put together by our office, and it really explains lots of things in detail in case I'm sure you'll find some things in it that you didn't realize that we were involved in. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
It went this way. Okay. Let's go back. I already signed up. Okay, the next meeting is Thursday, September 26th. And can we adjourn this one?
Wait.
Everybody done? Wait.
Ray Ayton is going to be the
Ray
moderator.
is going to be the moderator. Yeah,
And we have the City Council Liaison Report, which is given at City Council, usually by the moderator on Monday. Will you be able to do that, Julie?
No, I told Karen I can't this Monday, but and then we don't have it on Labor Day, so I'll come the next Monday.
Okay, September the 9th then. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. I guess.